Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed the Taiwan series so far. There's one more video left, but I wanted to interrupt it with a Q&A. A lot of you have been asking questions throughout the series, and also I put a Q&A kind of question for everyone to ask, so let's hop right in. So first question that kept coming up is, Edwin asked, am I Chinese or Taiwanese? And Hershey wrote, you said your mom was Taiwanese, your dad is from mainland China, or longtime American Chinese. And there was a few more questions about what ethnicity I am. It's a bit confusing. So my mom is from Taiwan, her grandmother's from Taiwan, her great mother's from Taiwan. As far as we can trace back, at least for 100, maybe 200 years, my entire mother's ancestry is from Taiwan. However, Taiwan's an island, so they definitely came from somewhere. We don't know where. But most likely it was from somewhere through China. But who knows? That was 200 years ago. For my dad's side, it's also confusing because my dad left when he was 2 years old. In 1949, when the communists took over China, my grandfather was one of the generals in the army for the Kuomintang, which is fighting against the communists. So they had to flee. So my grandfather stayed and fought against the communists, while my grandmother, who was from Mongolia, that married into my grandfather, they fled northeastern China, right in the border of Korea, where they were living. And they went all the way to the south, and then from there, and I think they went by horseback. And then from there, they took a boat over to Taiwan. So my dad was technically born in Liaoning, which is almost on the border of Korea and China. But when he was 2, he fled to Taiwan to avoid the communists, and he was born and raised there. So culturally, he's basically Taiwanese with this new generation of Taiwanese. My mom was the old generation of Taiwanese. But ethnically, I'm at least a quarter Mongolian, and the rest is some type of Chinese. Who knows? The second big question that kept coming up is, am I speaking Taiwanese or Mandarin? I speak Mandarin, which is the main language of Taiwan and the main language of China now. There's many dialects. The most common is probably like Cantonese, which, funny enough, I grew up in San Francisco, and that's what everyone spoke. So I assumed as a kid that was the most popular dialect of Chinese. But it turns out Mandarin Chinese, or what people in mainland China call Pudonghua, which literally just means common language, that's the most common. There are different accents. So the Taiwan version of Mandarin is very soft-spoken. So if I said, 我现在在坐在沙发上喝一杯水, this is the kind of the common tongue. This is how I would say it and how most people in Taiwan would say it. But if you're from Beijing, you would say, 我现在在坐沙发上喝一杯水. And they like curl their tongue a lot. So it sounds very different, even though it's the same language. Richard Mark asks, wow, I didn't know you spoke Chinese so well and your family was there. Interesting. Find a nice Taiwanese lady. Do you feel more at home there? The funny thing is, I thought I would feel a lot more home in Taiwan than America, because growing up, I didn't feel very at home in the US. Especially when I grew up, there was a lot of divide between Asian Americans and white Americans, black Americans, Hispanic Americans. We weren't really considered American when I grew up. Now I think it's a lot better. People kind of assimilate better, and also, there's less overt racism. And also, kind of unfairly, Asians have now been grouped with white people as Americans that are non-minorities. You can see this in university exams where, they'll say Asians and whites need to have this type of score to get in, versus if you're black or Hispanic or something, or Native American, then you can have this score to get in. So somehow we've now been grouped with like white Americans. And I know this is a fact because I accidentally had dinner with a KKK member, or at least a skinhead. I don't know what he was. Probably a neo-skinhead. We were at a taco stand randomly in California. A little bit late at night, we're drinking. Everybody's a bit drunk. and they were just chatting with us, me and my other buddy, and they were being like really friendly, really cool. And then I like noticed, it's like, hey, is that a SWAT sticker tattoo on you? And he's like, yeah. And he takes off his shirt, and I realized him and all his friends were skinheads, and they had straight up Nazi tattoos. And this is a good point that every country in the world, definitely in Russia, like there's these far right people who just for whatever reason, if you've seen American History X, they just end up falling for these groups. But I remember looking him in the eye and I said, hey, I'm not white, right? And he says, yeah, but he's like, yeah, but you're the good minority or something like that. He said, like, I forgot exactly his actual words, but his intent was, he's like, you're not like those Negroes or those Hispanic, the Spics, he's like, he said all these derogatory words. And I was like, what? And I was like, what's the difference? And he's like, I could tell, you Asians are, educated, you work hard, you're like us. And by us, he meant like white people. So that is a little side rant. But I never felt, really at home in the U.S., even though I guess I was technically accepted by these people. So when I went to Taiwan for my first time, I always thought, okay, maybe here I'll feel at home because, technically I'm Taiwanese. I speak the language. I thought I looked the same as them. But as soon as I got there, people were like, where are you from? And I'm like, oh, God. And I was like, oh, maybe. I was like, my mom's from here. And they're like, yeah, but where are you from? So I never felt Taiwanese, and I never felt accepted by the Taiwanese. I was always an outsider. Even now when I go back, even though I have family there, and not in a negative way, sometimes it's in a positive way. They're like, oh yeah, you're like, a wealthy American or educated abroad, but it's still, like, they don't consider me one of them. And actually on that same topic, part one of the question, this has been asked a few times. Kendo and Vegetables also asked, would you date or marry a Chinese woman? I have dated Taiwanese girls, especially in the U.S. I have nothing in common with them. Just like, I have never had anything in common with a very traditional Chinese girl. Taiwanese Chinese, what do you want to call it? My personality is not the standard, like, quiet, meek Asian guy. I think that's why I've always dated white girls, or at least like a Filipino girl or something, just like something like not like the typical, quiet, cutesy type of Chinese girl. I actually hate it. Like, I know some guys really like it, and ironically white guys like it, but when a girl acts super cutesy, I fucking hate it. It drives me nuts. So that's why I've never been into them. If anything, I probably have more in common with a Thai girl. But even then, I'm not. I think just Thai girls are just kind of, or the ones I meet at least, are more westernized. But yeah, like a traditional Taiwanese girl, nothing in common with them. Very different values, very different topics of interest, very different everything. Like I honestly have more in common with an average Ukrainian girl, which is probably why I've always been attracted to them when I met them, or like a European girl, or like a white Canadian or American girl. Lots and lots of questions about what I consider living in Taiwan, either full-time or part-time, even 6 months of the year, if I split my time with Ukraine or Thailand or somewhere else. Paul On also asked, it's beautiful, you have roots there, you speak the same language. Have you ever thought about staying in Taiwan for a long period of time, not just for a holiday? Numash asked, where would I rather live? Counting all factors, Thailand or Taiwan? There were a lot of questions on this topic. I mean, I wouldn't mind living in Taiwan if I really needed to be there for some reason. Taiwan is a nice country, has decent weather, has decent infrastructure. It actually has very good infrastructure in terms of the train network and getting around. The Wi-Fi is okay, it's decent, it's usable. I just don't have a reason or a connection to live in Taiwan. Like, if I had to live there, if you're like, Johnny, your job is here, you actually got someone pregnant by accident and you have to live here, I wouldn't mind living there. Like, it wouldn't be the worst place to live, especially because I have family, I have a connection there. If my parents moved there, I would consider spending a lot more time there. I don't know if I would live there full time, but I would at least spend months, a year there. I would even consider having an apartment there, and just like kind of bouncing back and forth. But as it is now, I don't have any desire to live in Taiwan. Everything that Taiwan has to offer, Thailand, I think for me, is better and cheaper. Someone asked the cost of living between Thailand and Taiwan. In general, I mean, if you compare, like, let's say Taipei versus Bangkok, right? Pretty much everything, including rent, is double the price in Taipei. I wouldn't live in Taipei. I would live in, like, Kaohsiung, which is next to Pingdong. It's like the big city an hour away from Pingdong. I think that's the city I would actually live in if I had to, relocate. It has almost most of the facilities and infrastructure that you would have in a big city of Taipei, but at half the price. It's also a little bit more chill. It's also much closer to where my parents' family is. It's closer to, it's on the beach. I'm a big beach guy. Taiwan doesn't have the best beaches. It has okay beaches, like, especially if compared to a country that doesn't have a beach at all or has cold weather. Like, Taiwan beaches are okay, but they're not great. They're not Thailand beaches. They're not Hawaii beaches. Someone else asked, why not make Taiwan a base and just travel from Taiwan? Taiwan actually doesn't have good flights. That's why it's kind of off this, like, tourist trail. So many people from, like, Europe or the US will go to Thailand, and then from Thailand they're like, oh, might as well go to, like, Malaysia or Cambodia or Vietnam. And the reason why they do that is because it's very easy to travel within this route. It's very cheap. There's lots of flights. Taiwan is like a 4.5-hour flight from any of those countries, or at least from Thailand, which is the main base. There's not that many routes, there's not many flights, and the flight is at least 2, 3, 4 times longer and 2, 3, 4 times more expensive. It's not insanely expensive. You can find flights for $100 or $200, but you're not gonna find like a $50 flight like you would to, like, Vietnam or to Cambodia. And you can't be there in an hour or 2 hours. Jip K asks, hey, thanks, I really like the Taiwanese series. You mentioned the South is less pricey than Taipei. How much is a one-person studio to rent in the South? Is it touristy? So I checked rental prices when I was there. I talked to my cousins about it. I checked online. I checked some listings. I was just curious. And in general, if you want to stay in the South, which is like Kaohsiung, Pingdong, you can get an apartment for like $300 a month, $400, $500, depending on how nice you want it to be. So it's very affordable. If you want to be in, like, Kending, which is like the touristy beach town in the South, it's extremely expensive. It's a bit overpriced. I wouldn't even really recommend going there right now. It's probably cheaper just to fly to, like, Thailand or somewhere, but to, like, do, like, a week vacation than just to, like, spend a week down there in these overpriced hotels. In Taipei, I took a look. If you want to be in the city center and near, like, a metro line, which you kind of have to be, you'd probably spend, let's say, $700 if you want a nice apartment. You can get something for $500 maybe, but it probably wouldn't be very nice. And fun fact is, they don't measure the size of an apartment by square feet or square meters. They do it by ping. So this apartment I'm renting right now might be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 ping, which is tatami mats. It's the same way that they measure in Japan. And this is definitely left over from the Japanese occupation, or what do you want to call it, the Japanese days when Japan controlled Taiwan, because why else would you measure by tatami mats if it wasn't for that? Stephen Walsh, who is a channel member, thank you, Stephen, asks, Mongolian warlord, they say that a lot of specialized chips are made down there. Are they heavily guarded like the fortress in Moldova? Thank you, Stephen, for being a channel member. If you guys want to get early access to all the videos, as soon as they're uploaded, you can join to support. $5 a month, you get a bunch of perks. But what's funny is when he first mentioned this, I was like, chips. At first, I thought he meant like, these like pineapple little desserts, or maybe like KFC flavored chips, which are actually pretty good, by the way. Shout out to Ruffles KFC chips. Not sponsored, but if you want to send me a case of it, I'll happily eat it. But no, he meant microchips, semiconductors. Yes, it is a heavily, heavily guarded secret on how they manufacture these extremely high-tech, advanced, like super tiny, like fingernail-sized microchips. And the reason why is nobody else in the world can make it. Nobody else has the technology. Taiwan has invested so much of their industry, time, money into building and researching these things, which is why if you want to buy a microchip for your iPhone, 16, or if you want to buy a microchip to control a ballistic missile, like a nuclear, missile or something, it probably comes from Taiwan. If you want to buy, a cheap, on-off microchip that adjusts your like heated seats or something, you can get that from other countries. But Taiwan is the only country that produces these like, 2 or 3 nanometer chips that have like trillions of transistors on it. It's such a crazy like topic that I can't even wrap my head around it, because how do you fit a billion of anything, or especially a trillion of anything on the size of a chip the size of your fingernail? And it blows my mind how smart these people are. They also had a lot of investments after World War II and all that stuff, but basically that's what they focused on, and they call it the silicon shield. And it's funny because the whole world depends on Taiwan producing these chips that nobody else can produce. They know that if China invades and Taiwan just threatens to blow up their own facilities, that the world would be set back 20 years. So there's an incentive for the world to allow Taiwan to be a safe, sovereign country, because if it really came down to it and China had troops on the ground and had taken over their presidential palace, had overthrown the government, there are instructions at TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, which is the biggest one, as well as the other ones, to just blow up the factory. Like, I'm sure, it's crazy, but I think they actually have, these explosives in place, or they have some plan for it, because they don't want this technology going to China. They don't want them stealing it. It's a silicon shield. It's one of the reasons why America protects Taiwan, is because we need this technology if we want to live in this advanced digital world, and we don't want to go back to using Pentium ones, right? Tail says, let's talk about U.S.-Taiwan support during our lifetime. It's not new and it's not record-setting yet. Well, as I'm recording this, recently they just passed aid not only to Ukraine but also to Taiwan and to Israel. And the reason why it's so important that they passed military aid to Taiwan, even though it was a much smaller amount than to Ukraine, is because it shows China that Taiwan is being protected by America, that Taiwan is a country that is allowed to defend themselves. China's entire rhetoric right now is that they threaten, they literally say, if America sells defensive weapons to Taiwan, then we will invade Taiwan. And America luckily has called their bluff and says, if Taiwan wants to defend themselves, we will supply whatever defense they want. Because Taiwan doesn't want to attack China. Just like Ukraine didn't want to attack Russia. Like, there was zero chance Ukraine, this tiny country comparatively, was going to invade Russia. Like, that wasn't even on anybody's mind. And the fact that Russia says, "Oh, we're defending our motherland," nobody was crossing your borders, you know. So it's the same with Taiwan. Is yes, in 1949, when the Taiwanese government retreated to Taiwan, their plan, the Kuomintang, their plan was to regroup, build up strength, and go back and take back China and take back what was the rightful country that they ruled over, take back all the history, take back the culture, take back the land from the communists, who were these bandits basically that just kind of hid around in the mountains while Taiwan and Japan were fighting. The Kuomintang and Japanese were fighting, and once they were weak after that war, the Communist Party just took over and just basically took over the country in a very unfair way. That's why the Kuomintang, Taiwan was like, you know what, yes, we're going to go back, invade China again, and we can take it back, we're going to kick out the communists, we take back the country. But it's been 70 years, and Taiwan, for the last, I don't know, at least 30 years or so, has been like, you know what, we're over it, we don't need all that land, we're happy with just this island, we don't even support the Kuomintang anymore, we just want to be a democracy, we just want to be Taiwan. So nowadays, I can guarantee you, if you ask any Taiwanese, do you want to fight a war against China and take back your original land? They'll say no, like zero chance. Even if technically, we all still own land in China. My parents were like, don't even think about it. Like we wouldn't even agree to even try to take it back because it's been so long. Taiwan's completely fine. We don't need China. So I really hope and pray that in this lifetime, China will never actually invade Taiwan, but it's always a risk. And every year or two, especially when China has their own domestic problems or bad economy, they re-rattle the saber and say, you know what, we're gonna reunify Taiwan with China against their will. Right now, it's saber rattling. It's a talking point that the Communist Party can use to trump up support for their own party, but I hope it never happens. Leanne or Lena, she writes, "Hey Johnny, thanks for the vlogs and stuff. As someone who's experienced both life in Ukraine during the war and now visiting Taiwan, can you shed light on some general mood of the people in both places? Specifically, do you notice any parallels between the concerns of Ukrainians during war and the sentiments of the Taiwanese citizens regarding China's actions or potential actions? Are the people in Taiwan feeling super nervous or apprehensive given the ongoing events in Ukraine?" That's a really, really good question. Thank you for asking that. It feels almost exactly the same. Whenever I speak to people in Taiwan, and I've asked many people, all my relatives, just out of curiosity, I ask them, but also just random strangers. I just ask them, how do you feel about what China has said? Do you think they're going to invade? And it was almost exactly the same as what people felt in Taiwan or in Ukraine before the war. Sure, there's going to be a small percentage of people who will, be overly cautious, overly paranoid, saying 100% China's going to come invade. But they're such a small minority. It's not the vast opinion, right? There's also on the other side a small minority of people that say, no, there's zero chance. It's not going to happen. But the vast majority of people, I would say, think, I don't want it to happen. I'm not going to think about it. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. If it happens, there's nothing we can do about it anyways. Why would China invade? There's no reason for them to invade. Let's not think about it. And in Ukraine before the war, it was very similar as well. Russia had no real reason to invade Ukraine, despite all the Russian propaganda and talking points that people like to regurgitate. These so-called biolabs or pigeons or NATO expansion, or Nazis. This is complete all BS, by the way, and this has all been proven, like time and time again. If Russia really cared about NATO expansion, they would be going after Argentina right now. They would have went after Finland. They would have went after Sweden. But instead, they're like, oh, we don't care. So they wanted to invade Ukraine for other reasons. And it wasn't to protect Russian speakers, because if you look at it, all the homes that they've destroyed are all from Russian speakers. If they said instead, hey, we want to punish Russian speakers for wanting to be part of Ukraine and not come back to Russia, that I would believe. So if China said that, we want to punish the Taiwanese for having a better economy than us, for being more educated than us, for being more cultured, for being more, pro-West, for not needing mainland China, for not wanting to be part of the, communist system. We're going to punish you for that, and we're going to come and attack. That I would believe. And they said, hey, you're making us look bad by having so much freedom, so much technology, and such good international relations. You're hurting us, our ability to, to control the Uyghurs, and to take over other countries like Tibet, to, put down free speech and, close our internet, not let people look up, what happened in Tiananmen Square. If China said that, yeah, I would believe them. But the reality is they don't actually have a reason to invade Taiwan. They would like Taiwan because it's a valuable asset, but the Taiwanese do not want to be part of Taiwan. And there's no reason to wage war or to invade because Taiwan is not a threat. That being said, I 100% now understand why people in Taiwan respond the way they do and feel the way they do. It's because I felt the same way before the war. Rationally, there's no reason for China to invade. China has so much to lose if they do try to invade. And then third, even if they try, they probably won't be able to take Taiwan. And if they do take it, it wouldn't have been worth it, because they would have lost not only so many soldiers and so much money and weapons and blood, but also their international standing as a country that other countries want to do business with. It just wouldn't be worth it. Imagine if Taiwan actually got invaded by China. Who's going to want to work with China anymore? It's one of those countries right now we're like worried about China. We're banning TikTok. We're like, I think China's going to do something bad. But no one really knows. China actually hasn't straight up sent their military somewhere. They've done little shady things like oppress the Uyghurs in their own land, or illegally annexed Tibet as part of their country, sending military in there, controlling them. But all these things, internationally, people are like, it's like what happened with Crimea. We're not going to start. It's unfair. It's not right. But we're not going to start a war over it. Maybe we'll do some sanctions, but that's about it. So right now, the world is free to do business with China. But if China actually invaded, started a war, they would get so screwed, and it wouldn't be worth it for them. So I don't just listen to what people say, because in reality, as civilians living in the modern world, we can't fathom why a country would attack us. We can't fathom why a war would start, because logically there's no reason why a war should start. So if you're a rational, logical person, you're going to say, no, China is not going to invade. There's no reason for them to. I'm not going to think about it. There's nothing I can do about it anyways. Yeah, sure, you can be one of those preppers. Sure, you can move. Sure, you can say, I want to be prepared just in case they do. And if you did that, you'd be leaving your home country. You'd be leaving all the benefits of living in Taiwan. Would it be worth it? I don't know, right? But obviously, the vast majority of people choose to stay there, and they're investing money into buying real estate, which is actually very expensive in Taiwan. They're investing money in buying businesses or starting businesses. And for me, actions speak louder than words. So as long as very wealthy and intelligent people are spending money investing in the country, then most likely they're confident enough where they don't think it's going to get invaded. But I made that same mistake in Kyiv when I bought my property, because I looked around and I said, you know what, very wealthy people, very smart people, these international companies are spending a lot of money investing in Kyiv, opening restaurants, opening businesses. They've done the calculation. They also don't think Russia's going to invade. Yeah, sure, there was always, the fringe that's saying, oh yeah, for sure, 100%, Russia's going to invade. They didn't know. Nobody knew. Like, France's, military security experts, they also were wrong. And, Macron recently just, had to get rid of all of them. I said, you know what didn't you, why couldn't you predict that the Russians was going to invade? And their argument was like, everything was against them. Russia couldn't have won this war. They would have lost way too much to invade. Either Putin just has the worst intel in the world and he's a psychopath, or he's not going to invade. Rationally, he should not invade. So that's the situation there. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but it's a complicated subject. Speaking of Ukraine, Russia war, a couple people asked any word of my second home in Kharkiv since Russia has been bombarding that state the last couple of months. So my tenant, who was a volunteer staying there for 7 months, he moved out about a month ago, maybe 2 months ago now, and he just felt the heat. He's like, it's getting very dangerous. Also, unfortunately, for the last 6-7 months, Speaker Mike Johnson was holding up the vote, not allowing the vote for Ukraine to have aid. So they ran out of air defense. So Kharkiv was unprotected. And already when I was in Kharkiv last winter, we would have weekly, twice a week attacks, and it wouldn't even be on the news because it just happened so often. So that's ramped up a lot. Thank God that the U.S. finally approved aid for Ukraine. Hopefully Kharkiv will be protected now, but still it's a very dangerous place to be. And because of that, I've chosen not to even think about my apartment. I've chosen not to actively look for someone to rent it out because I don't think anyone in their right mind would go there right now. I do want to go visit and see it, but I know it's going to be dangerous. McLink and a few other people have asked, hey, Johnny, love your content. When am I going to be returning to Kyiv? Well, I'm actually on my way back right now as you're watching this. I don't want to do any spoilers because, as you know, with videos, it takes a few weeks to edit, upload, put into the schedule. And you're going to be watching one more video of my Taiwan series, and then you're going to see me start my trip from Taiwan through Europe and eventually back to Ukraine, because it just takes a long time. Unfortunately, all the airports in Ukraine are still closed since the start of the war, so there's no way to even fly into Ukraine. Trust me, I'd rather just fly directly to Kyiv and not have to deal with this long, crazy route that you're going to see in the next couple of videos. But I have to somehow fly into another country and then from there make my way back by land. And I've chosen to do it the cheapest way possible. So you're going to see how it ends up. It's gonna be a fun journey. But by the time this video is actually published, I'll either be crossing the border, like literally as you're watching this, or maybe I will actually already be back somewhere in Ukraine. Nightingale Song asks, what made you choose Ukraine as a place to live and opposed to Taiwan? I don't see Taiwan as being worse or more expensive. I think I answered this, mostly already. I mean, actually, no, I haven't. The cost of Taiwan and Kyiv itself, let's say, actually pretty similar. You're right. Kyiv and Taipei are actually pretty similar. housing in the city center of Kyiv, like in a nice apartment, is probably the same as in Taiwan. Going out to eat, probably about the same price. Getting around, almost everything. Some things are obviously a little bit cheaper in Ukraine, maybe like wine or like Western food, cheese, things like that. But yeah, in general, you're right. It'll probably be a similar price. I just never had this connection to Taiwan. Like, even though my family's from there and I speak the language, culturally, it's too Asian for me. While the US or Western Europe was too Western for me. Ukraine was right in the middle. I'll give you a couple examples. I like the fact that when I go to someone's house in Kyiv, or someone comes to my house, the first thing they do is take off their shoes without even asking. Everyone just takes off the shoes. People are very respectful. They want to be clean and polite. They also like to bring fruit or a bottle of wine, some alcohol, some beer, something. They almost always bring a gift, even if they're just dropping by, some cake, whatever it is. These are kind of very Asian things to do. While in the West, it's very common. I actually got into an argument with my cousin when some of his friends come over because we were living together. This is a long time ago, like after college, and I got into an argument. I said, "Hey, just you have to tell your friends to take off the shoes when they come in. Like, just because they're white and they're not used to taking off their shoes like in their house or in their friends' houses, like when they come into our apartment, it's your job to tell them, hey, please be respectful, take off your shoes, because I remember his buddy would walk in these dirty ass shoes that you wore outside. Obviously, he would jump on the couch, walk around. It was nasty, and I would get super frustrated and annoyed whenever people would do that, but in Taiwan, it's too respectful, where somebody will come in and they would be afraid to to sit somewhere without asking permission first. They'll be afraid to go get a glass of water on their own because they want to be respectful and wait for the host to be, to do everything. It was too much. It's too extreme. I like when my friends come over for them to make themselves at home. They can sit where they want. They can go to the fridge if they want. They can make themselves something to drink. They don't have to ask me permission to go to the bathroom. It's just too much. So I've always kind of been in the middle. That's why I always liked Ukraine. It really felt like the perfect halfway point between Asian culture and Western culture, and literally geographically, it is right in the middle. Jill Bremer asks, can I travel indefinitely, or do I have to return to my home base at some point, U.S. or Ukraine? I don't necessarily have to go back to the U.S. It was really just to visit my parents, or my some of my family members, like my cousins. But I've discovered this hack where instead of me going back, I can just meet them somewhere in the world. My favorite male cousin, Jacob, I met him up in France last, I don't know, maybe it's been 3 years ago now. I wanted to meet him in Taiwan, but we're going to miss each other by 3 weeks. I met my parents in Taiwan, my sister. I would rather meet them somewhere else. Same with friends. I met up a lot of friends in Thailand. So I don't really have a physical reason to go back there. I don't have any ties there. Yeah, I still do my banking there, stuff like my driver license. So knock on wood, but there's a chance every few years I'd have to go back and renew something. Luckily, that hasn't happened yet. With Ukraine, I have to go back because I have these 2 apartments and this car. If it wasn't for my Cayenne, I wouldn't actually have to go back this year because I rented out my place in Kyiv And as much as it sucks, the place of Kharkiv is kind of just sitting there right now, but I'm okay with it sitting there. I had a house cleaner go in after the last tenant and clean the place and open the windows, just so it doesn't, deteriorate while it's sitting empty. But I got to go back and start up the Cayenne. I got to drive it, or I got to sell it. It's just it's a great car, but it's like a racehorse. You can't just like let it sit there, and even if it's in a safe place, like it has to run. It has to get driven. It has to get driven hard. Porsches don't like to sit there. It's very damaging for the car just to sit there, and it's already been 4 or 5 months already, and I think it might be still okay. I unplugged the battery this time, so hopefully it'll start up when I plug it back in. But who knows? It could be a nightmare when I go back. But I gotta go and do something with it. So I either gotta drive it out of the country, or I gotta sell it. Oh crap! I just broke my. And I gotta buy a new Slava Ukraine wristband because I literally just broke this right now. So I have ties now to Ukraine, so I do kind of have to go back once in a while, even though I think I would go back anyways, to be honest. I miss my friends there. I miss the country. I just want to be there. It sucks to have to go back during war, because it's very, very difficult to go back with the airports being closed. It's dangerous to be there. It's hard to get back out. Nothing's easy right now. Like, life in Ukraine wasn't easy before the war. Life in Ukraine is much harder now. So obviously I kind of wish I didn't have to go back. I could just sit out the entire war and just go back when it's done. But at the same time, I'm kind of glad I have a reason or excuse to go back, if that makes sense. And as far as traveling indefinitely, that's actually what I did for like 10 years. If anyone has followed my channel prior to me moving to Ukraine, since 2008, I've been living abroad. I mentioned this a few times in other videos, but when I was living in the US, I had accomplished everything I thought I should accomplish to make me happy. I graduated from a good university. I got a good job at a big American company. I bought, my dream car. I was living in a cool house in the middle of LA, like just down the street from Melrose. I transformed myself to be what I thought the ideal American guy could be. I went to cool nightclubs on the weekend. I was wearing Ed Hardy, whatever. I bought my clothes on Melrose. I learned how to pick up girls, and I realized none of that made me happy. I realized all that was BS, and that my life in the U.S. was not fulfilling, and it wasn't who I was. At first I thought I needed these things, or I needed to become this person just to fit in. But then once I did it, I was like, you know what? This is stupid. Like, why would anyone live this type of life? It's not fulfilling. It's not authentic. I honestly didn't like who I was becoming, and also the people I was spending time with. And I don't keep in touch with these people that much anymore, but sometimes I randomly see them on Facebook or something, and I'm like, man, you're still doing the exact same thing you were doing, 10, 15 years ago. You're still going to the same nightclubs. You're still dressed like a douchebag. You're still based your whole persona on picking up girls. I don't know. I'm glad I moved on. And when I moved to Thailand, it was because I realized that none of that stuff mattered, and that I could pursue trying to figure out what made me happy. And at the time, it was scuba diving, it was doing Muay Thai, it was wearing Crocs and board shorts, and I loved it. So for 10 years, I just traveled and lived around the world, kind of in the gray zone as a tourist. From that point, I became location independent. I put down that book, The Game by Neil Strauss, and I picked up The 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. That became my new chapter in life. become a digital nomad. And that was really, really a great way to set my life for now that I'm kind of forced to bounce around and travel. I mean, I guess if I really wanted to, I can just settle down somewhere, sign a 1-year lease in Poland or something and just be like, okay, I'm just going to be here. Or sign a 1-year lease in Thailand, though getting a Thai visa for a year actually would be hard. So to answer that question, if I wanted to travel indefinitely, I can go back to being a digital nomad. I can stay in each country for three months at a time. Having a U.S. passport is a very nice blessing because most places we go, we can get 90 days on arrival without needing to apply for a visa. So I could do like 90 days in Thailand, 90 days somewhere in Europe, 90 days in Taiwan, 90 days in Ukraine. So I could travel definitely. But I was tired. That's why I bought the apartment in Ukraine, in Kyiv. That was my retirement. I said, I want to just settle down, have an easy life, and my goal was to live in one of those apartments and rent out the other one. And I didn't actually decide if I was going to live in Kyiv or in Kharkiv. Rationally, I was going to live in Kharkiv and then rent out the one in Kyiv because I can get more money for it. But at the same time, I thought, you know what? Even if I'm getting like $700 a month from my place in Kharkiv, if I'm not paying rent, and I could just live in my Kyiv place, $700 in Ukraine was enough to have like a pretty simple life, to go out to eat, to buy groceries, to take like public transport. This is before I bought a car. And I think I was done. I was like, you know what? I'm very, very blessed that I saved up enough money from my businesses when I was, running them as a digital nomad. And then I had a nice chunk of change. I had about $200,000 saved up from when I sold my dropshipping stores. And I took that money and I bought these 2 properties. Maybe it was 250 grand. And I said, you know what? That's all I need. I need one place to live and one place to rent out for income. And I was ready to settle down. That's why I wanted permanent residency, so I wouldn't have to do visa rents anymore. And then Russia just took it all away by invading, by deciding to go fuck up the lives, not only me, but of literally tens of millions of people. And it sucks. I'm very, very lucky. I'm very blessed. I'm very fortunate that I have other options, that I still have money in the bank, and I'm used to living out of a backpack. I speak English, I speak Chinese, I can go to other places. I have a U.S. passport, but it's much harder for other people who don't have these privileges. But it still sucks. Like it sucks because there's nowhere else I want to live. I spent the last 10 years looking for where I wanted to live, and I thought I found it. And then fucking Putin comes in and fucks everything up. So it is what it is. I'll be back soon. So thanks for watching. Thank you for all the channel members who have, been supporting on the way, or the people who, use Buy Me a Coffee. I am on my way back to Ukraine now, but before you see that, you're going to see my epic journey of me traveling from Taiwan through Europe, a couple pit stops along the way before I head back. So if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Slava Ukraine, and China, please never invade Taiwan. We don't need you. We don't want you. Get the fuck out. Bye, guys. Take care.